So you can't see this, but hopefully you can hear it. Behind every Boise State Public Radio podcast is a team working hard to bring you stories that matter. So if you value podcasts like this one, please support them. Hit donate at boisestatepublicradio.org. Thanks.
From the studios of Boise State Public Radio News, you're listening to Idaho Matters. I'm Gemma Gaudette. On October 1st, Idaho's public defense system went from being a county-run office to a state office, and it has not been an easy transition. There have been numerous stories of defendants trying, with no luck, to contact their court-appointed attorneys, as well as those court-appointed attorneys not showing up in court to represent their clients. In fact, the ACLU of Idaho says the situation has reached a crisis level. In fact, they're now asking the Idaho Supreme Court to step in, making that ask on December 23rd when they filed an emergency motion with the court. Richie Epic is one of the lead attorneys on this case, working with the ACLU of Idaho, and he's joining us now to talk more about this. Richie, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much, Gemma, for your attention to this. I really appreciate it.
So, Richie, can we go back to 2015, and can you begin by reminding us about how this whole process began, really with a class action suit, Tucker versus State of Idaho?
Yes, and in fact, we really should go back to 2010, and that's when I began working on this. And so we are 15 years into this now. And in 2010, this month, January 2010, was when a national report came out after they had examined the public defense system in Idaho and reported back to Idaho's leaders that everywhere they looked, the system was unconstitutional. And so me, alongside many others, spent half a decade trying to get the legislature and governor to correct that problem, because obviously we can't have an unconstitutional criminal legal system in Idaho, and yet here we are still today. And so after 5 years of efforts in the legislature and then the governor's office, we realized that we were going to have to get the judiciary involved, and that's when this lawsuit was filed in 2015.
So, Richie, can you talk a little bit about how you said that the system basically all over the state was broken and it was unconstitutional? Because some would argue that part of the issue is that some of these county offices were staffed, were running well. I mean, you take Ada County, you take Kootenai County, for example. And they would argue that, a lot of the issues were in these smaller counties where there was not a county-run office. So you had what are contract attorneys, right? Private attorneys who take the public defense contract. What did you see during these 5 years? Were there some offices that, were, for the most part, running well?
Well, the reality is we have, and it's a really important point that you make, Gemma, because we have in Idaho some of the best attorneys in this state are public defenders and have been public defenders. And all across the state, both contractors and in the county offices that are institutionally managed, we have people with extremely well-developed skills, with talent and smarts and experience working as public defenders and working supporting public defenders in these offices and achieving amazing results. But what they've been given by the state is often an impossible job. They haven't been given the resources that they need. And that has resulted in not just these contractors, but even in, and really especially in, the most populous counties in Ada County, in Kootenai County, in Bonneville County, in Canyon County, where we are seeing public defenders and their supporting team being asked to take on caseloads that are double, triple, and sometimes quadruple the maximum number of cases that we know from national standards, from national studies, are the maximum that anybody could ever handle. And so that results in what's happening now today, probably certainly the worst that I've heard of it in 15 years is what we're seeing today. But all throughout this time, from 2010 to 2015, from 2015 up until the changeover in October of 2024, where both for contractors throughout the state and some of the smaller counties, and in the largest counties, most populous counties, where the caseloads far exceed what anybody could handle, resulting in triage. That's what happens is some clients get the attention that they deserve and need and are constitutionally entitled to. Many other clients cannot.
So, Richie, with that said, part of the issue is money. And we saw that when this was a county-run system, and we're seeing that now as a state system. I think there's an argument to be made that the public defense system, even on a county level, was not funded to the level that it should have been funded. In fact, the prosecutor's offices have much more funding than public defense offices in the state of Idaho. October 1 happens. It changes to a statewide system. And part of your argument, Richie, is the fact that not only did public defenders leave when this happened, because due to the fact that there were massive pay cuts given to numerous public defenders, and public defenders don't make a lot of money. We should be very clear on that. They are not private attorneys. How much does funding matter, whether it was a county system or what we're seeing now with a state system that is direly underfunded?
Well, there's really two very important points when we talk about funding. And first is we have to step back before that. Idaho, as a state, for years now, even exceeding, when you compare it to other states across the country, we have in this state an addiction to prosecution and incarceration. And when we criminalize mental health issues, when we criminalize substance use problems that families and individuals are struggling, rather than providing the assistance that they need, we clog our courts and we overburden our public defense system. We overburden our criminal legal system altogether. And so if the state of Idaho wants to be smart about criminal justice, and if taxpayers in Idaho want to spend their money wisely, we need to look at how we're approaching social issues and education and family crises across this state, because public defenders are handling a lot of cases that really should have never been cases in the first place, and certainly shouldn't be addressed by arrest, jail, and prison. So the amount of money that we're spending on public defense is outsized compared to what it should be from the first. But then if we look at those cases that are going to end up in the criminal legal system, even considering that, we cannot solve this problem by just throwing money at it, especially right now. We have lost many, many public defenders. And as you pointed out, these folks are not making a lot of money to start with. And to do this job, all of these people, the public defenders, their support staff, their investigators, the social workers that work with them, all of them come to the job needing and bringing a lot of heart, a lot of empathy, a lot of interpersonal skills that are necessary to defend someone who is facing the great weight and all of the resources of the state against them. And when you lose as many people as we have lost over the last several months, I don't know if even hundreds of millions of dollars creates the magic wand that we need to make those attorneys appear out of nowhere. And so funding is an important piece of this, and the system has absolutely been underfunded from the get-go, from at least 2010 when that report came out, the national report that I mentioned earlier. But we can't just look at funding. We have to look at making sure that we have the attorneys and can recruit the attorneys we need, whatever they're being paid, and also look at the other side of the equation. Look at what are we criminalizing? Why are we criminalizing it? And why are we prosecuting as often as we are to fill our jails and prisons?
Right. So with that said, Richie, when this transition happened on October 1 to the statewide system, which, this was part of the ACLU's argument, was this needs to be a state system. Were you surprised when we started hearing these stories of defendants not being able to contact their attorneys. I mean, we should note that in Ada County, public defenders didn't even have telephones on October 1. So hard to contact an attorney. And then we saw, in particular, when this came to light, it seems in Owyhee County, when there were defendants going to court and no attorneys present. How surprising was it to you to see what happened when this transition happened?
A lot of it was not surprising at all, unfortunately, Gemma. I was there, the ACLU of Idaho, with me, and many other public defenders were in the legislature and in the governor's office in 2023 when this system was being crafted, essentially literally ringing the alarm bells, saying as clearly and as unmistakably as we could to the governor's staff and to the legislature that this is not going to work. You don't have the structure and you don't have the funding that you need. Now, it wasn't surprising in that sense. We predicted this. We told the state and we told the courts that it wasn't going to work. It has been surprising in just how much of a disaster it has already become. There are, as you mentioned, people who have had to argue for their own bond by themselves, people who have called the state public defender's office over and over and over again, some every business day, and have not been able to get a call back because the state has under-resourced this office. There have been, as we highlighted in a recent filing, a gentleman who drove 3 times from Boise to Bonner County, only to show up and find that he had no attorney to assist him. As you mentioned, there have been counties where public defenders have no phone system, counties where there's no interpreters available for those who need language assistance. Even the mail systems, people have not been getting the notices that they need to appear in court. That I didn't expect. And I think that shows just how the structure and the funding that the state has provided here have made this an impossible job for even those who are trying to administer this new system.
So who dropped the ball on this?
Well, the state has dropped the ball for 15 years. We fought the first battle in this lawsuit, which went to the Supreme Court. We are now there for the 3rd time, but the first time we were there, that was a question. The state argued it's not responsible. And we said, well, of course you are. That's been decided since the 1960s by the United States Supreme Court. And sure enough, the Idaho Supreme Court confirmed that it is not the county's responsibility. It is obviously not these individual families and defendants who are being hauled into court. It is not public defender's responsibility. It is the state of Idaho's responsibility. And so the legislature and the governor have had been on notice of that clearly from their own Supreme Court for 8 years now. And when we point fingers, we should absolutely not be pointing fingers at public defenders. We should not be pointing fingers at these families and individual defendants. It is the legislature and the governor who have kicked this can down the road, and now it's being kicked into the gutter.
Rich, you have 2 minutes left with you. I quickly want to talk about this motion because one of the things you are asking the Supreme Court to do is order the release of all of these defendants if they do not have representation within 7 days, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. Why is that important?
We have a basic fundamental promise in our constitutions, our Idaho Constitution and our United States Constitution, that says that we are a country that believes in liberty. And if the state wants to take your liberty away, we have known for over half a century now, that it's the state's responsibility to provide you with defense. And we're now at a point where it's clear that the state of Idaho cannot do that, and for all I can tell, is unwilling to do that. Just last year, over the summer, Oregon has met with the same crisis, and the federal Court of Appeals for our region, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, ordered the same thing. That look, you've got to get people. You've got 7 days. I mean, the Constitution, I don't even think allows 7 days, but at least given the transition we're facing, you've got 7 days to figure this out for each person that you want to haul before your courts. And if you can't do it, you got to let them go.
So very quickly, Richie, what's next? Have you heard from the Supreme Court? Have you heard from the governor, from the legislature? I mean, are you going to do something? Because you could file a notice of appearance for every single defendant, and you could go to court for every single one of these folks and make sure that they do get released. That's a big ask. But with that said, what is next in this, and what's the response?
Well, we're still waiting on a response in the case. The state has asked the court to give it a few more weeks to respond to our emergency motion, and so we should see a response by the end of this month from the state. And I hope that the Idaho Supreme Court will take this up expeditiously. Obviously, we have put together all of the evidence that we had up through the filing to show what a crisis there is. And I think it behooves the court to take this up expeditiously. At the same time, I think the legislature is going to have to take this up. The governor's recommended some substantial additional funding. I don't think that that's necessarily going to do the job, especially given the situation that we're in right now. But both from the legislature and from the courts and from the state in this litigation, I think we should see some response, at least in the next few months, and we'll respond in kind once we see what they say.
Well, we would sure like to continue this conversation with you as those responses come in. So we will, of course, be reaching out, but appreciate the time with you. We've been speaking with Richie Empink. He is one of the lead attorneys on this case in regards to the transition to the State Public Defense Office and the crisis that is in. He, of course, is working with the ACLU of Idaho on this. This is the Idaho Matters podcast. I'm Gemma Gaudet.
If you like podcasts like this, explore more from the Boise State Public Radio podcast family. There you'll find a mix of daily news, Idaho voices, and in-depth series on a wide range of topics. I'm talking wild horses, political scandals, sustainable ranching, and militia groups in a post-January 6th world. Wherever you get your podcasts, just search Boise State Public Radio to find what Idaho's NPR station has in store for you.